The midnight zone has swallowed more human knowledge than any place on the surface of this earth, and every time scientists lower a camera into its darkness, something stares back. You are listening to Depth Unseen. Where light ends, the story begins. Tonight we go somewhere most humans will never go. Settle in, close your eyes, and drift with us. The midnight zone begins where all light dies, 1,000 meters below the surface of the ocean. That is roughly 3,280 feet of water pressing down above you. 3,000 feet. Think about that for a moment. That is taller than the tallest building ever built by human hands, and then taller again, and then taller once more. And at the bottom of all that height, there is nothing. No sunlight, no warmth from above, no colour, no blue, no grey, nothing at all. Just a darkness so complete and so total that the human brain cannot even imagine it properly. We have a word for it, absolute darkness, but the word does not do the thing justice. You have never been in a darkness like this. You have never been anywhere close. And yet, life is here. Enormous, ancient, terrifying, beautiful life. Life that has never seen the sun. Life that does not know what the sun is. Life that has been here, in this particular darkness, for so long that it has become something else entirely. Something that looks back. The midnight zone, that vast, cold, crushing layer of ocean that stretches from 1,000 meters deep all the way down to 4,000 meters, is the single largest living space on this entire planet. 70% of all the seawater on Earth exists right here, in this zone. 70%. More than 2/3 of all the water that makes up our ocean, and we have explored almost none of it. Scientists believe we know less about the midnight zone than we know about the surface of the moon. The moon, which is nearly 240,000 miles away from us, we know it better than we know what is happening right now, beneath our own feet, beneath the waves, in the deep dark water of our own world. That thought alone should make you pause. There are creatures down there that have never been named, whole species, whole families of life, things that swim and drift and pulse with their own cold light, in a world so removed from ours that they might as well exist on another planet, and we do not know what they are. We do not know how many of them there are. We do not know what they eat, or how they reproduce, or how long they live, or what sounds they make in the dark. We drop cameras on cables into that blackness, and sometimes the footage comes back showing something we have never seen before. Something that does not match any creature in our books. Something that was not supposed to exist. And this is what terrifies scientists. Not that the midnight zone is dark and cold and crushing. Scientists can measure darkness. They can calculate pressure. They can account for cold. What terrifies them is how much they do not know. What terrifies them is the suspicion growing stronger with every expedition that what we have found so far is not the whole picture, that what we have found so far might be only the beginning. Let us start at the surface. Right at the top of the water, where the light is warm and gold and the waves catch the sun. This is the world you know. This is the world where dolphins leap and seagulls call and children swim in the shallows on summer days. This is the sunlit zone, the top 200 meters of ocean. And it feels safe here. It feels known. But even here, there is a secret pulling at the edges. Because every single day, before the sun rises, something enormous begins to move. A migration so massive that for years, scientists thought it was the ocean floor itself shifting upward on their instruments. They called it the deep scattering layer. And when they first detected it on sonar in the early days of ocean research, they genuinely did not know what it was. A false bottom, rising, a wall of something, moving upward in the dark, then sinking back down when the sun came up. It happened every single night, like breathing. Like the ocean itself was inhaling something vast from the deep and then breathing it back out again. What was it? It was life. Billions of creatures, tiny shrimp, lanternfish, small squid, drifting jellies, microscopic organisms beyond counting rising from the depths every night to feed at the surface, then sinking back down into the dark before dawn. A daily migration of such staggering scale that it is considered one of the largest movements of living things on the planet, every night, without fail, for longer than human civilization has existed. And we only discovered it because our sonar equipment registered a wall of noise coming up from below. This is what the ocean does. It hides things in plain sight. It keeps its secrets in layers. Below the sunlit zone, the light begins to change. It goes from gold to blue, from blue to grey, from grey to a dim and dusky twilight that feels more like the inside of a very deep lake than anything we think of as ocean. This is the twilight zone. The mesopelagic, from 200 meters to 1,000 meters deep. And even here, even in this middle layer, the pressure is already enough to crush an unprotected human body. The weight of the water above is not a gentle thing. It is not something you negotiate with, it simply presses. And it presses harder the deeper you go. A human body at 600 meters deep without any protective equipment would be crushed in less than a second. The air spaces in your lungs, your sinuses, your inner ears, all of them would collapse instantly under the force of 60 atmospheres of pressure. 60 times the pressure you feel right now, sitting or lying wherever you are, breathing the air of the surface world. The ocean does not care about you. It does not make exceptions. It simply is what it is, and what it is would end you before you understood what was happening. But the animals of the Twilight Zone do not mind. They were built for it. Their bodies have no air spaces to crush. Their flesh is soft and flexible and dense with the sea itself. They move through 60 atmospheres the way you move through a summer breeze. Easy, thoughtless, natural. And then the light runs out completely. At 1,000 meters, the last photon of sunlight disappears. Not dims, not fades to almost nothing. Disappears, goes. There is no sunlight beyond this point. Not a sliver, not a trace. The midnight zone begins here. In total, permanent, absolute dark. The temperature here is around 4 degrees Celsius. That is just barely above freezing. Just enough warmth to keep water liquid. Just enough to sustain what lives here. The pressure at this depth is 100 atmospheres, 100 times what you feel on the surface. And it only gets worse the deeper you go. By 4,000 meters, it reaches 400 atmospheres. 400 times the pressure of the air above you right now. 400 times. The midnight zone is not a place. It is a condition. It is a state of being so extreme, so foreign to everything we are and everything we know, that entering it without protection is not simply dangerous, it is instantly fatal. No human has ever entered the midnight zone without the protection of thick steel and carefully engineered technology. And even with that protection, even inside the strongest submersibles ever built, the scientists who have gone down there report something strange. Something that no instrument can measure. A feeling. A heaviness that has nothing to do with the pressure outside the hull. A sense that you are somewhere you were not meant to go. That the darkness outside the porthole is not simply an absence of light. That it is watching you. One oceanographer who spent 12 hours in a submersible in the midnight zone described it this way. She said the feeling never left her. Not during the dive, not after. She said that the closest comparison she could find was the feeling of standing in a very old, very large building at 3 a.m, alone, in the dark, knowing that the building was still alive around you in some way you could not explain. She said the midnight zone felt like that, but stretched, but without walls but infinite. She went back 3 more times. That is what the midnight zone does to people. It terrifies them, and it calls to them in the same breath. Now, let us talk about what lives here, because here is where it gets extraordinary. Here is where the facts become so strange that they start to feel like they were invented, like someone wrote them into a story and then forgot to tell us it was fiction. In the midnight zone, where there is no light from the sun, where no plant can grow because photosynthesis, the process by which plants use sunlight to make food, is completely impossible here, the food chain should collapse. And yet it does not. Life does not collapse here. Life has found another way. Life has found several other ways, and every single one of them is more astonishing than the last. The first way is marine snow. This sounds gentle. It sounds almost beautiful, and in a way, it is. Marine snow is the constant, slow, drifting fall of dead organic material from the upper ocean down into the deep. Pieces of dead plankton, fragments of broken shells, fecal pellets from animals above, microscopic scraps of everything that lived and died in the sunlit and twilight zones above, drifting down through the water column like a permanent, silent snowfall. It sinks slowly, so slowly, and as it sinks, animals in the midnight zone are waiting, drifting, hovering in the cold and the dark with their strange sensitive mouths and their enormous eyes and their alien patience, waiting for the snow. This is the base of the food chain down here, dead things falling from above. The midnight zone is, in a very real sense, fed by death, sustained by what is lost and forgotten in the world above. Every creature that dies in the sunlit ocean, every fragment of every organism that ever swam in the light, eventually drifts down here. And here it becomes food. And from that food, life continues. Enormous, complex, astonishing life, sustained entirely by the leftovers of a world it cannot see and will never reach. But marine snow is not reliable. It is thin, it is scattered, and the midnight zone is vast beyond imagining. So the creatures here cannot simply wait. They have developed strategies, and some of those strategies are so ruthless, so perfectly designed, so breathtakingly efficient, that they feel less like biology and more like invention. Consider the anglerfish. You have seen pictures perhaps. That bulging black body, those needle teeth, too long for the mouth, jutting out at impossible angles. That strange filament dangling above the head, tipped with a small glowing lure that pulses with cold blue-white light in the absolute blackness of the midnight zone. The anglerfish does not chase its prey. It does not pursue. It does not expend energy in the dark. It simply hangs there, barely moving, in the freezing water, and it waits, and the light pulses. And the light is the only thing visible for perhaps hundreds of meters in every direction. And smaller creatures, drawn to light the way all living things are drawn to light, because light means warmth, light means photosynthesis, light means food, they swim toward it. They swim toward what they think is safety, and they are eaten. The anglerfish is patient in the way that only something built for darkness can be patient. It does not count time. It does not know hunger the way we know hunger, as an urgent, gnawing thing. It has slowed itself down to match the pace of this world, which is the pace of almost nothing happening, punctuated very occasionally by something happening all at once. And when something happens all at once for an anglerfish, it is very bad news for whatever swam toward the light. But here is the thing about the anglerfish that scientists did not understand for a very long time. For decades, every anglerfish caught or photographed in the deep sea was female. Every single one. The females were the ones with the lures. The females were the ones with the terrifying teeth. The females were the ones that showed up on every sonar screen, in every deep sea net, in every photograph taken by every submersible that ventured into the midnight zone. And for a while, scientists just accepted this. They assumed that male anglerfish were simply rarer, or smaller, or harder to find. They were right about smaller. They were very, very right about smaller. The male anglerfish is so reduced, so miniaturized, so thoroughly transformed by the demands of the midnight zone that for years no one recognized it as the same species. The male anglerfish is tiny, a fraction of the female's size. It has one purpose and one purpose only: to find a female in the absolute darkness and attach to her. Not metaphorically, literally. The male bites into the female's body, and then he fuses. His skin merges with hers, his blood vessels merge with hers. His organs slowly dissolve away his eyes, his digestive system, almost everything that makes him a separate creature, until all that remains of him is a small lump attached to the female's body, connected to her circulatory system, receiving nutrients from her blood, and providing her with a permanent, always available source of fertilization. He disappears into her, and she carries him, sometimes several of them, small, fused, barely there remnants of males, attached to her body in the dark as she drifts and hunts and pulses her light in the cold. When scientists first understood what they were looking at, the word that appeared most often in their papers was not scientific. The word was extraordinary. Because even for people whose job is to know strange things about the deep ocean, the anglerfish's solution to the problem of finding a mate in a place where you may never see another member of your species your entire life, that solution was extraordinary. It was grotesque, and it was miraculous, and it was so perfectly, ruthlessly adapted to the conditions of the midnight zone that it felt almost like design, like something thought about it, like something decided this was the answer. Nothing decided, evolution decided, over millions of years, in the dark. And this is just one creature, one species. In one small part of one ocean, the midnight zone contains thousands of species, tens of thousands perhaps, many of them unnamed, many of them unseen. And if the anglerfish is this strange, this perfectly engineered for darkness and scarcity and crushing cold, then what does that suggest about the others? What has millions of years of absolute darkness and extreme pressure produced in the creatures we have not yet found? Scientists do not know. And that not knowing is not a comfortable thing. It keeps them up at night in a different way than this story might keep you adrift in the dark. It keeps them up with questions that do not have answers yet. Questions like, how many species are down there? How complex is the ecosystem we have not yet mapped? What are the creatures doing that we have never observed? What sounds fill the midnight zone that no human instrument has yet recorded? Because the midnight zone is not silent. This is one of the things that surprises people most when they learn it. You might imagine that a place of total darkness, near freezing temperature, and crushing pressure would be perfectly quiet. A dead place, a still place, but it is not. The midnight zone is full of sound, clicks and pulses and low, rolling groans that carry for extraordinary distances through the cold, dense water. Some of these sounds come from creatures communicating. Some come from the movement of the water itself, from the deep ocean currents that circulate enormous volumes of seawater across the floor of the world in slow, vast rivers. Some come from things scientists have not yet identified. Sounds recorded in deep ocean hydrophone networks, underwater microphones placed by researchers to listen to the sea that do not match any known biological or geological source. One of these sounds became famous, not because it was beautiful, because it was terrifying. It was recorded in 1997 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the American government agency that studies the ocean using a network of hydrophones stretched across the Pacific Ocean. The sound was low, very low, lower than most humans can hear without special equipment, but it was loud, extraordinarily, impossibly loud, the loudest biological sound ever recorded in the ocean at that time, and it was organic. The scientists who analysed it agreed whatever made this sound was alive. They called it the bloop, and they did not know what made it. For years, the bloop sat in the files of ocean researchers as an unexplained mystery. The amplitude, the volume of the sound suggested it came from something enormous, something larger than any known animal, something that should not be able to exist at the size it would need to be to produce that sound. The speculation that followed was enormous. Was it a new species of whale? A giant squid of a size beyond any ever found? Something else entirely? Something the ocean had kept hidden? The current scientific consensus, reached much later, is that the bloop was most likely the sound of a large icequake, the fracturing and shifting of massive ice formations in the Antarctic region, which can produce sounds very similar to biological signals when filtered through deep ocean water. Most researchers now accept this explanation. The bloop was ice, not life. But here is what stays with you, what lingers. What the bloop actually revealed, before the ice explanation arrived, was this. We had a network of hydrophones across the Pacific Ocean, designed specifically to listen to the deep sea, and we heard something so loud, so unmistakably present, that we could not identify it. We could not rule out that it was alive. The midnight zone had made something that our best listening equipment could not immediately explain, and for a moment, for years, Actually, it was possible that something was down there that science had never accounted for. That possibility does not entirely go away with the ice explanation. It relocates. It moves sideways to the next unexplained recording, and the one after that. Because the bloop was not the only strange sound ever recorded from the deep ocean. It was simply the most famous one. The upsweep, the train, the slow down, the whistle. These are real recordings from NOAA's deep ocean hydrophone network, and several of them remain only partially explained or not explained at all. They are in the files. They sit there in the data, named, categorized, and unresolved. The ocean hums with things we do not understand, and the midnight zone hums loudest of all. Now think about the light. Not the absent sunlight we have established that. Zero sunlight, nothing from above. The dark is absolute. But the light that is made here, the light that life has invented in the dark because life, it seems, will always find a way to make light where there is none. Bioluminescence. The ability of a living thing to produce its own light through chemical reactions inside its body. 76% of all ocean animals in the deep sea are capable of bioluminescence. 76%. More than 3/4 of everything that lives in the dark ocean makes its own light. Think about what that means. In a place of perfect darkness, in a place where light does not come from above, the inhabitants have collectively decided through millions of years of evolution of survival and failure. And survival again, that light matters, that light is worth creating, that the energy required to make bioluminescence is worth spending, even in a world of near starvation, even in a world where calories are precious and rare. Life looked at the dark and it said, no, not entirely, not for us. And so the midnight zone glows, not brightly, not warmly, not like a fire or a lamp. It glows in cold blues and greens and occasional pale golds, in flashes and pulses and slow, steady throbs of light. A language written in photons that we are only beginning to learn to read. Animals use their light to hunt, the way the anglerfish does, dangling its lure in the dark. Animals use their light to hide some creatures, create light on their underside specifically to match the faint glow of the world above them, making themselves invisible to predators looking up from below. Animals use their light to communicate, to find mates in the dark, to warn others, to signal danger. The pelican eel, another creature of the midnight zone, has taken a different approach to darkness. Its skin absorbs up to 99.7% of all light, not reflects, absorbs. Nearly every photon that touches a pelican eel disappears into it. This makes it invisible even in bioluminescent environments, where other creatures might cast enough glow to reveal a shadow. The pelican eel casts no shadow. It is darkness wearing a body. It moves through the midnight zone as a moving absence, a place where even the cold bioluminescent light goes to die, and the smaller creatures around it do not see it coming until it is far, far too late. And yet even the pelican eel is not the strangest thing. It is not even close to the strangest thing. Because for every creature we have named and described and photographed in the midnight zone, there are more that we have only glimpsed. Shapes on cameras, blurs in footage, disturbances in the water that suggest something large passed by just outside the frame. In 2021, researchers in the Indian Ocean, as part of an expedition specifically designed to study the midnight zone, recorded footage of a creature that, even after extensive analysis, could not be confidently assigned to any known species. The footage shows movement. It shows a shape that is large, a shape that moves with the deliberate, unhurried ease of something that has never been afraid of anything in its life, because nothing in its world has ever threatened it. It passes through the camera's view and it is gone, and the scientists on the ship above, watching the footage come through the cable, went quiet. That footage exists. The gap in knowledge that it represents exists, and it points like a cold finger in the dark toward everything else we have not yet seen. The midnight zone is the largest ecosystem on Earth. It accounts for the majority of the ocean's volume. It is home to more animals, more individual animals, in total number than any other habitat on the planet, and we know almost nothing about it. Less than 20% of the ocean floor has been mapped with any degree of detail. The midnight zone, which is not the floor but the vast dark water column above the floor, is even less understood than that. We are, in the most literal sense, in the dark about most of the life on our own planet. And then there is the pressure. We have mentioned it, but it deserves its own moment, its own space, because the pressure of the midnight zone is not simply a measurement, a number on a gauge that scientists monitor from inside their steel shells. It is a force that shapes everything down here. Everybody, every behavior, every adaptation. At 400 atmospheres, the pressure at the deepest part of the midnight zone, the force pressing on every square inch of surface, is roughly 6,000 pounds. 6,000 pounds per square inch. If you placed a human body in that environment without protection, you would not be crushed in the way you might imagine, like a can being stepped on. The process would be faster and more absolute than that. The air spaces in your body would collapse in milliseconds. The nitrogen in your blood would behave in ways it was never designed for. Your cell walls, your tissues, your very molecular structure would be subjected to forces that life at the surface was never engineered to endure. And yet the creatures of the midnight zone live in this. They were born in it. Their cells are adapted to function under 6,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. The way your cells are adapted to function in the open air, they carry the pressure inside them as a kind of ballast, a kind of home. If you were somehow to take a creature from the deepest part of the midnight zone and bring it to the surface, to the warm, light, low-pressure world we live in, it would not survive. The pressure difference would be just as fatal in the other direction. The deep-sea creature would, in effect, explode. The internal pressure adapted for the deep would no longer be counterbalanced by the external environment. The midnight zone does not share its creatures easily. It holds them. It keeps them. They belong to it completely. This is part of why exploration is so difficult. It is not just the expense of building submersibles strong enough to withstand the pressure. It is not just the technical challenge of maintaining instruments and cameras and power systems at extreme depth. It is that the midnight zone resists observation in a fundamental way. It is designed, by physics, to keep its contents inside. The creatures cannot come up. The water does not give them back. And when we send machines down to look, those machines see only what falls within the narrow cone of their lights and the brief window of their battery life. In a space so vast that finding something specific down there is like looking for a single grain of sand on a beach the size of a continent. While wearing a blindfold, with only a small candle to see by, we find things anyway. We keep going back, again and again, expedition after expedition. The researchers who study the midnight zone load their equipment onto ships and sail to the middle of the ocean and lower their cables and their cameras and their remotely operated vehicles into the dark. And every single time, every expedition, without exception, they find something they did not expect. Something new. Something that rewrites some portion of what they thought they knew. A behavior. A creature. An ecosystem. A process. Something that says, you were not quite right. You had it almost, but not quite. There is more. There is always more. And this relentless, patient revelation is the nature of the midnight zone. Not a single dramatic discovery that changes everything at once, but a slow accumulation of astonishment, a steady deepening of wonder, like the ocean itself, pulling you deeper with every breath. Tonight, we are only at the beginning. We have barely crossed the threshold. We have stepped just past the point where the light gives out and the dark begins, and already the world has become unrecognizable. Already the rules have changed. Already the creatures we have met here, the anglerfish with its stolen male, the pelican eel that swallows light, the glowing multitudes in the cold, dark water, have demonstrated that what we call normal is only what we happen to know. There is so much more below, and in the parts of this story that still wait ahead, we will go deeper. We will find the things that keep the researchers awake on their ships at night, staring at footage they cannot explain. We will follow the marine snow to the floor. We will enter the places where the temperature drops below what seems biologically possible and find life there. Impossible, stubborn, astonishing life. We will listen to the sounds that have no known source. We will look at the shapes that have no name. The midnight zone does not end where your imagination does. It continues. It goes further than you think. It goes further than science was prepared for. When the first explorers reached the places we are going to tonight, you are still listening to Depth Unseen. Where light ends, the story begins. And tonight, the story goes deeper. We left you in the cold, in the dark, surrounded by glowing things and crushing weight and the slow, patient fall of marine snow drifting down from the world above like the memory of warmth. We left you with the anglerfish and its terrible patience, with the pelican eel that swallows light, with the sounds in the hydrophone data that do not have names. We left you at the beginning of the midnight zone, just past the point where the last photon of sunlight gives up and turns back. And now we are going further in. The deeper you go into the midnight zone, the more the rules change. Not just the physical rules, the pressure and the temperature and the darkness, but the biological rules, the rules about what life is supposed to need, the rules about what organisms require to survive, the rules that every biology teacher in every school on the surface of the world teaches to every student who has ever learned about living things. Those rules say, life needs energy, life needs warmth, life needs certain chemicals, life needs sunlight, or at the very least, life needs the products of sunlight, the sugars and compounds made by photosynthesis, the food chains that flow from plants and algae using solar energy to grow. Those rules, down here, are wrong, not partially wrong, not bent or stretched or operating in modified form. Wrong, completely, fundamentally, paradigm-shatteringly wrong. And the thing that proved them wrong was found in 1977 in water nearly 2.5 kilometers deep in the Pacific Ocean by scientists who were not looking for what they found, who had no expectation of finding it, who had no theoretical framework that could have predicted it, who looked at their camera screens as the submersible descended toward a ridge on the ocean floor and saw something that none of them, not the most experienced researcher, not the most creative theorist, had ever imagined they would see in the midnight zone. They saw life, not a few bacteria, not some sparse scattering of organisms. Life, dense, extraordinary, thriving, impossible life, clustered around something on the ocean floor that was producing heat, enormous heat, in a place where everything should be near freezing. In the absolute dark of the midnight zone, there were towers, chimneys of mineral and rock reaching upward from the seafloor, and from the tops of those chimneys, water was pouring out, dark water, superheated water, so mineral-rich it turned black as it hit the near-freezing seawater around it. Water so hot it should have been steam, except that at this depth, under hundreds of atmospheres of pressure, water cannot become steam. The pressure keeps it liquid even at 400 degrees Celsius. 400 degrees, the temperature of a hot oven, pouring out of the seafloor in the cold and the dark of the midnight zone. And clustered around these chimneys, these black smokers, as the scientists named them, was life unlike anything ever seen on Earth. Giant tube worms, longer than a human adult, with no mouth, no digestive system, no way to eat in any traditional sense, swaying in the current from the vents. Pale crabs, ghostly and eyeless, picking their way across fields of white mussels, shrimp in their thousands, covering the rocks, living in water close enough to the vent to be scalding hot by any measurement we apply to life at the surface. All of them alive, all of them thriving, in a place that should, by every rule we knew, be completely, absolutely, permanently dead. The scientists who found this, the researchers on the Alvin submersible, that small and famous deep-sea vehicle operated by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, were so astonished by what they saw that the initial reports from the dive were described afterward as the most excited scientific communications in the history of deep-sea research. Not the most carefully worded, not the most precisely measured, the most excited. These were trained scientists who had spent their careers being careful and controlled and precise, and they saw the hydrothermal vents, and they lost their composure, and their field notes showed it. They used words like unbelievable, like extraordinary, like impossible. Because what was sustaining this life was not sunlight. What was sustaining this life was chemistry. Deep inside the rock of the ocean floor, seawater had seeped through cracks in the Earth's crust and been superheated by the magma, the molten rock, churning below. As the water was heated and pressurized, it dissolved minerals from the rock: hydrogen sulfide, iron, zinc, copper, cobalt. Chemicals that, to most life on Earth, are toxic. Chemicals that, in the right concentration, will kill a surface animal without hesitation. And those superheated, mineral-laden, hydrogen sulfide-rich waters poured out of the vents and into the midnight zone. And at the boundary between the scalding vent water and the freezing ambient ocean, bacteria were waiting. Not ordinary bacteria, chemosynthetic bacteria. Bacteria that had solved a problem the rest of life on Earth had never needed to solve, because the rest of life on Earth had always had sunlight available somewhere above. These bacteria had learned, over millions of years of evolution, in the dark, in the poison-laced water around the vents, to take hydrogen sulfide and other vent chemicals and use them the way plants use sunlight, to extract energy from chemistry rather than from light, to build organic matter from inorganic chemicals, to create food from what the Earth itself provided. The process is called chemosynthesis. It is photosynthesis without the photo, energy without the sun, life powered not by a star 93 million miles away, but by the churning, restless interior of the planet itself. And those chemosynthetic bacteria became the base of a food chain. A complete, complex, diverse, thriving food chain, operating in total darkness, fed by the Earth's own heat and chemistry, in the crushing cold and weight of the midnight zone. The tube worms did not need mouths because they had evolved a different arrangement. Their bodies were filled with chemosynthetic bacteria, living inside their tissues as symbiotic partners, partners that made food from the vent chemicals and shared it with the worm that housed them. The worm gave the bacteria shelter and access to the vent chemicals. The bacteria gave the worm nutrition. Neither could have survived alone. Together, in the dark, they had become something entirely new. When biologists understood what they were looking at, the implications were so large that they have not stopped reverberating through science in the decades since. If life can exist without sunlight, if an entire ecosystem, complete with predators and prey, and scavengers and decomposers, and the whole intricate web of biology we associate with surface ecosystems, if all of that can function on chemistry alone, in the dark, at crushing depth, at temperatures that range from near freezing to nearly boiling within a few meters, then the definition of life that scientists had been working with was too small. It needed to be rewritten, not adjusted, rewritten, and it was. The discovery of hydrothermal vent ecosystems in the late 1970s changed biology in a way that only a handful of discoveries in the history of science have ever changed it. It changed our understanding of where life can exist on Earth. It changed our search for life on other planets. Because if life on our own planet does not need sunlight, does not need what we always thought was the fundamental requirement of all existence, then the universe becomes far more crowded with possibility than we ever imagined. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn, some of which are known to have liquid oceans beneath thick shells of ice, far from the warmth of the sun, those moons became candidates. Not just interesting geological curiosities, candidates for life, real, complex chemosynthetic life, powered by the heat of those moons' own interiors, in dark oceans we have not yet reached. The midnight zone, by being so strange, so impossible, so stubbornly alive in defiance of what we thought we knew, opened a door into a universe where life is not the fragile, sun-dependent exception we once believed it to be, but possibly something far more widespread, far more creative, far more tenacious than we had imagined. That door is still open. What is on the other side is still unknown. And now, still in the midnight zone, still in the dark, let us meet something that should not exist either. Something that is named after a monster from old stories, but is nothing like the monster, and everything like the zone it calls home. Let us meet the vampire squid. The vampire squid is not actually a squid. It is not actually a vampire. It belongs to its own order, Vampiromorphidae, which means it is neither squid nor octopus, but something ancient, something in between, something that branched off from its nearest relatives so long ago that it has become its own category of existence. Its Latin name is Vampiroteuthis infernalis, vampire squid of hell. This is the name scientists gave it, not poets, scientists. Because when the first specimen was brought up from the deep and described, the researcher who named it felt that no softer name would do it justice. It is small, roughly 30 centimeters long, about the size of a football. Its body is deep red to velvety black, a color so dark it absorbs light in a way that makes it look like a hole in the water. It has the largest eyes relative to body size of any animal on Earth. Not just any animal in the sea, any animal anywhere. Enormous blue eyes that take up a significant portion of its head, designed to detect the faintest traces of bioluminescent light in the absolute darkness of the midnight zone. It has 8 arms connected by a web of dark skin, and when it is threatened, it can pull those arms up and over its body, wrapping itself in its own web like a cloak, displaying a field of sharp, pale spines on the inner surface that makes it look, suddenly, like a spiky ball of darkness rather than a soft and vulnerable creature. This display is called the pineapple posture by the researchers who study it, which is perhaps the most cheerful name ever given to something that evolved in hell. But the vampire squid's most astonishing quality is not its eyes, or its cloak, or its name. It is what it eats. The vampire squid feeds on marine snow, on the drifting particles of dead organic material that fall from the surface world above, on the slow, silent precipitation of death that sustains everything in the midnight zone. But the vampire squid has taken this to its logical extreme. It has 2 long, retractable filaments, thin, thread-like structures that it extends into the water column around it, trailing them like fishing lines, letting them drift. Marine snow and other particles collect on the sticky surface of these filaments, and then the squid reels them in and eats what has been collected. It is the only cephalopod, the only member of the great group of animals that includes octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish, that does not hunt living prey. Every other cephalopod on Earth, in every ocean, at every depth, catches and eats living creatures. The vampire squid alone has decided that the dead rain from above is enough, that it does not need to chase, that in the midnight zone, with its crushing pressure and near-zero oxygen levels, the vampire squid lives in the oxygen minimum zone, where the concentration of dissolved oxygen in the water is so low that most animals simply cannot survive there. In that environment, the only viable strategy is the one it has chosen: to slow down, to simplify, to let the world come to it. The oxygen minimum zone. This is something that deserves its own moment of quiet attention. Oxygen in the ocean does not distribute evenly. Near the surface, where the water meets the air and where photosynthesis produces oxygen as a byproduct, oxygen levels are high. In the deep, below the midnight zone, where water circulation can bring some oxygen down from above, levels are moderate. But in between, at roughly the depth where the vampire squid lives, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 meters, overlapping with the upper midnight zone, there is a layer where oxygen is nearly absent. Not low, nearly absent. A layer of ocean water so depleted of the oxygen that most animal life requires that it functions as an invisible barrier, a chemical wall. Most creatures cannot cross it going down. Most creatures cannot survive inside it at all. The vampire squid crosses it every day, lives inside it permanently, has made the oxygen minimum zone its home and its refuge, because the creatures that would otherwise eat it, the larger predators of the midnight zone, the deep-sea sharks, the swordfish that sometimes dive to depth, cannot follow it there, cannot breathe there. The vampire squid's habitat is its armor. Its extreme environment is its protection, and yet even in this stripped-down, oxygen-depleted, freezing, crushing existence, the vampire squid makes light. When threatened, on those rare occasions when a predator manages to reach it, the vampire squid does not flee. It cannot flee quickly. It conserves energy too carefully for rapid escape. Instead, The tips of its arms begin to glow. Bioluminescent photophores scattered across its body activate, and it wraps its arms over its body in the pineapple posture and spins and twists and then releases something unexpected, a cloud of glowing mucus. Not the ink that ordinary squids release to create a dark, confusing cloud. A glowing cloud, a luminescent decoy that hangs in the water where the squid was a moment ago, pulsing with cold light. While the vampire squid itself goes dark and slips away into the blackness, it knows better than any predator does. This is the genius of the Midnight Zone. Every creature here has found the one strategy perfectly suited to this exact environment. Not an almost perfect strategy, not a compromise, the exact solution to the exact problem, and the elegance of those solutions, the deep, cold, evolutionary elegance, is what the scientists who study this place return for. Again and again, despite the expense and the difficulty and the danger, they return because every answer they find in the Midnight Zone makes the questions better. Now we go to the floor. Now we descend all the way to the bottom of the Midnight Zone, where the cold water meets the cold rock, and the darkness of the water becomes the darkness of the sediment, and the long, slow work of decomposition begins. Because the Midnight Zone floor is where things go to end, where everything that died above eventually arrives. And on that floor, in that soft, cold, ancient sediment, something has been happening that scientists did not discover until 2004. And when they found it, the name they gave it was the gentlest possible name for one of the strangest things biology has ever produced: whale fall. That is what they called it, a whale fall. When a whale dies in the ocean, when that vast body, sometimes 30 meters long and 150,000 kilograms, loses its final breath and goes still, it does not immediately sink. For a while it floats, and the surface scavengers come: seabirds, sharks, other large predators, drawn by the smell and the promise of easy food. They take what they can reach: the blubber, the softer flesh, the exposed portions. But the whale is enormous, and eventually the gases inside it dissipate, and the body becomes dense again, and it begins to sink, slowly at first, then faster, down through the sunlit zone, down through the twilight, into the Midnight Zone, where the darkness closes around it, and the temperature drops, and the pressure begins its relentless work, and then it reaches the floor. A whale fall, the scientific term for a whale carcass that has settled on the deep ocean floor, is one of the most significant biological events that can occur in the Midnight Zone, because a whale body is an enormous reservoir of organic material, bone and fat and protein, concentrated in one place, on a floor where food is otherwise extraordinarily scarce. It is like someone dropping a feast in the middle of a famine, a feast that, because of the cold and the limited bacterial activity at this depth, does not rot quickly, a feast that lasts, that can sustain a community of life for decades. The process of a whale fall unfolds in stages, and each stage brings different creatures. In the early months after a whale reaches the floor, large scavengers arrive: sleeper sharks, hagfish, rat-tail fish, consuming the soft tissue in a slow, methodical stripping that can take years. Then, as the soft tissue disappears, smaller organisms move in. Polychaete worms, small crustaceans, mobile invertebrates of many kinds, picking over the bones and extracting what the large scavengers left behind. This second stage can also last years, and then the bones themselves become the ecosystem. The fat within whale bones, and whale bones are extraordinarily fat-rich, saturated with oil, in a way that land animal bones are not. The fat becomes food, but it cannot be eaten directly. The fat is locked inside the bone matrix, inaccessible to most organisms. It requires something special to unlock it, something that, until 2004, science did not know existed. They were found in 2004, in the Monterey Canyon off the California coast, at nearly 3,000 meters depth, living in the bones of a grey whale that had settled there. Small, pink, feathery-looking worms, barely a few centimeters long, covering the bones in dense mats. The researchers who found them had never seen anything like them. They examined them carefully. They analyzed their biology, and what they found was so peculiar that it changed our understanding of how decomposition works in the deep sea. These worms, named Osedax, which is Latin for bone devourer, have no mouth. They have no stomach. They have no digestive system in any traditional sense. They are, in a very real way, animals that should not be able to eat at all, and yet they eat whale bones, not the surface of the bones, the inside of the bones. They dissolve their way in. Osedax worms attach themselves to the bone surface and extend root-like structures down into the bone matrix. These roots secrete acid. The worms produce their own acid internally and direct it into the bone through specialized tissues, and this acid dissolves the outer layers of the bone, creating channels and cavities that the roots can penetrate further. Inside those cavities, the roots absorb the fat released by the dissolving bone. But the worms themselves cannot digest that fat, so inside their root tissues, chemosynthetic bacteria, different bacteria from those at the hydrothermal vents, but operating on the same principle of chemistry-based nutrition, break down the fat and provide the worm with usable energy. The worm houses bacteria that feed it. The bacteria live inside the worm's roots, in a structure that has no analog in surface biology. The worm provides access to the bone. The bacteria provide digestion. Together, they reduce whale bones to nothing. Together, they do something nothing else in the ocean can do. They unlock the deepest nutrition in one of the most significant food sources on the midnight zone floor, and by doing so, they create habitat. Because as the Osedax worms dissolve into the bone, they create holes, tunnels and channels and cavities in the bone's structure, and those holes are colonized by other organisms. Small worms of other species, crustaceans, specialized bacteria. The bone, hollowed from inside by the zombie worms, becomes a miniature ecosystem in itself. A city inside a skeleton, a community of life in the remains of the largest animal that ever moves through the sea. And this process, the slow, acid-carved, bacteria-assisted breakdown of whale bones on the midnight zone floor, is one of the primary ways that the carbon and fat stored in whale bodies is eventually recycled back into the deep sea ecosystem. Without Osedax, the whale falls would be less complete, less efficiently dismantled, and the ecology of the midnight zone floor would be correspondingly poorer. We did not know these worms existed until 2004. We did not know this process happened. We did not know that whale bones on the deep sea floor were cities. We simply had not looked closely enough, for long enough, with the right equipment in the right places. And when we finally did, we found something that rewrote another small portion of our biology textbooks. How many other things are down there waiting to do the same? The researchers who study whale falls have identified, over the years since their discovery, that a single large whale can sustain a deep-sea community for between 50 and 100 years. A century of life fed by one death. In the midnight zone, where food is always scarce and always precious, one whale represents not just a meal, but a legacy. 100-year endowment of nutrition that seeds a community, that sustains creatures that sustain other creatures, that cycles nutrients through the deep sea ecosystem in ways that ultimately affect the chemistry of the entire ocean. Whales, it turns out, are not just remarkable for what they are in life. They are remarkable for what they become in death, for the worlds they create by falling, for the ecosystems that bloom in their bones, for the strange, mouthless worms that make those bones into homes. The midnight zone is full of this kind of thinking, this kind of solution. You look at a problem. How do you feed a community in a desert of water where food is almost non-existent? And the midnight zone shows you not one answer but dozens. Marine snow, drifting down from above. Hydrothermal vents, feeding life from below. Whale falls, providing concentrated bursts of nutrition that sustain communities for generations. Bioluminescence, turning the absence of light into a tool for survival. The oxygen minimum zone, turning a hostile environment into a refuge. Every single adaptation, every solution, every strategy in the midnight zone has been honed by millions of years of the most extreme selection pressure imaginable. Only the most precisely engineered survives down here. there is no room for almost. In the crushing dark, at near-freezing temperatures, with near-zero oxygen and food so scarce it can barely be called scarce, it can barely be called available at all. In that environment, every aspect of every organism must work perfectly, always. And the result, the accumulated result of all that perfection under pressure, is the most diverse and in many ways the most sophisticated collection of biological solutions on the planet. More species may inhabit the midnight zone than any other single habitat on Earth. We do not know. We genuinely do not know, because we have not counted them, because we cannot count them, because every time we go down and try to count, we find something new that was not in the count before. There are estimates. Scientists who specialize in deep-sea biodiversity have produced models and projections suggesting that somewhere between 500,000 and 10 million species may inhabit the deep ocean. 500,000 to 10 million. That range, that enormous, 20-fold gap between the low estimate and the high, tells you everything you need to know about how much we do not know. When the error bar in your estimate spans 9.5 million species, you are essentially admitting that you are guessing. Educated, thoughtful, scientifically informed guessing. But guessing. 10 million species. In the dark, in the cold, in the crushing pressure of a place we barely visit. 10 million forms of life, each one presumably as extraordinary in its own way as the anglerfish, the vampire squid, the Osedax worms, the tube worms of the hydrothermal vents. 10 million solutions to the problem of existing in the most hostile environment on the planet, and we have named and described perhaps a small fraction of them. We are, by the best measures available to us, in the very earliest stages of understanding what lives in the midnight zone. And yet in those early stages, in the partial, incomplete, fragmentary knowledge we have accumulated so far, there have already been revelations large enough to change science. The chemosynthesis discovery, the realization that life can exist without sunlight, the implications for the possibility of life on other worlds, the understanding of how whale falls sustain deep-sea communities for a century, the discovery of bioluminescence as not a curiosity, but a fundamental biological strategy used by the majority of deep-sea animals. Every one of these revelations arrived as a surprise. None of them were predicted. None of them were anticipated by the theoretical frameworks that existed before the midnight zone was explored. This is what makes it terrifying for scientists. Not the dark, not the pressure, not even the mystery of how many species exist there. What terrifies scientists? What keeps the deep-sea biologists, and the ocean chemists, and the marine geologists, and all the others who have devoted their careers to understanding the midnight zone perpetually awake with questions, is the sense that the discoveries so far have not been in diminishing returns. Each revelation has not been smaller than the last. Each expedition has not found less than the one before. The surprises are not thinning out as we learn more. If anything, the more we know about the midnight zone, the more clearly we can see the outline of everything we do not know. The more sharply we can perceive the enormity of the unknown that surrounds our small island of understanding. That is unusual in science. Normally, as a field matures, the rate of paradigm-shifting discovery slows. The big questions get answered, and what remains are finer and finer details. Not so with the midnight zone. Not so with the deep ocean. Every answer reveals 3 new questions. Every discovery redraws the boundary of what is possible. The midnight zone does not behave like a problem being slowly solved. It behaves like a problem getting larger the more closely you look at it. And in the cold, dark water, something glows. Something always glows. Something drifts, and pulses, and waits. Something is performing a behavior no camera has ever captured, in a part of the ocean no submersible has ever reached, in a darkness so complete that even the animals there navigate by chemistry and sound, and the faintest electrical signals from the bodies of their neighbors. And it has been doing this for longer than our species has existed. For longer than the concept of darkness had meaning to any mind capable of pondering it. The midnight zone was here before us. It will be here after us. It is not waiting to be understood. It is not waiting at all. It simply is. And we are small lights in a vast dark, descending as far as our technology allows, finding wonder at every depth, writing it down in the language of science and the language of awe, and sinking still deeper. Because there is more below, there is always more below. In the parts still to come, we go to the places that even deep-sea scientists consider extreme. We will visit the Hadal Zone, the trenches, the places where the ocean floor itself opens into cracks in the earth, so deep that Mount Everest placed inside them would be submerged. We will find the creatures that live there, creatures so adapted to the most extreme conditions on Earth that they have become, in a biological sense, another category of life entirely. We will listen to what the scientists say about what they saw when they went down, and we will follow the story of the Midnight Zone to the place where the story begins to feel less like exploration and more like myth. But for now, let the weight of the water above settle over you. Let the cold of the Midnight Zone replace the warmth of wherever you are. Let the bioluminescent glow of 10 million unnamed species pulse slowly at the edge of your awareness. Let the marine snowdrift. Let the vampire squid trail its filaments in the dark. Let the whale fall sustain its century of life in the sediment below. And the Osidax worms do their slow, acid work in the bone. And the hydrothermal vents pour their superheated chemistry into water that should not be able to sustain anything and yet sustains everything. Let all of it exist as it has always existed, before you knew it was there, and before you go back to the surface where the light is, and the pressure is nothing, and the rules make sense. Down here, for a little longer, let the rules be different. Let the dark be comfortable. Let the unknown be a presence rather than a fear. Let the Midnight Zone hold you the way it holds everything that has ever learned to live within it, with patience, with cold, with the kind of stillness that is not emptiness, but fullness beyond anything the surface world can offer. Something is glowing in the dark nearby. You cannot see it yet, but it is there. The Midnight Zone ends, and something far older begins, and the creatures waiting at the bottom of that transition have never once seen light, never once felt warmth, never once known a world less crushing than the one that made them. You are still listening to Depth Unseen, where light ends, the story begins. And tonight, we go to the deepest place on Earth. We have been in the Midnight Zone. We have learned its rules. We have met its creatures, the anglerfish with its glowing lure and its stolen males, the vampire squid trailing filaments in near-zero oxygen, the Osidax worms dissolved into whale bones on the cold sediment floor, the hydrothermal vents pouring superheated chemistry into darkness and creating life from nothing but rock and heat. We have gone, in the course of this story, from the sun-warmed surface down through the twilight and into the absolute dark of the Midnight Zone. And we have found it strange and vast and humbling. But the Midnight Zone is not the bottom. The Midnight Zone ends at 4,000 meters. 4,000 meters is deep. It is deep by any standard that makes sense to a human mind. But the ocean does not stop there. The ocean floor, in most places, sits somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 meters below the surface. That bottom layer, the abyssal zone, the floor of the Midnight Zone, where the sediment lies in ancient drifts and the pressure is heavy enough to crush anything we are made of, that is the bottom for most of the ocean. Most, but not all. Because in certain places on the ocean floor, the floor itself opens. It cracks. It splits along the lines where two enormous plates of the Earth's crust meet, and one slides beneath the other. And in those places, the floor does not simply stop at 4 or 5 or 6,000 meters. It drops. It plunges downward in long, narrow V-shaped cuts in the Earth, like wounds in the planet's face, and it keeps going, down past 6,000 meters, down past 7,000, down past 8, down past 9, down past 10, down, in the deepest known place on Earth, past 11,000 meters. These places are called trenches, and the deepest, longest, and most studied of all of them sits in the western Pacific Ocean, in a region where the Pacific Plate slides beneath the Mariana Plate in a geological process so slow and so powerful that it has carved a trench nearly 2,500 kilometers long and 69 kilometers wide. The Mariana Trench, 11 kilometers deep at its maximum, 36,037 feet from surface to floor at its deepest point, a location called Challenger Deep, 11 kilometers. Think about what that number means. The highest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest, the summit that humans have climbed with supplemental oxygen and enormous effort and significant danger, is 8.8 kilometers tall. If you placed Mount Everest inside the Mariana Trench at Challenger Deep, the peak of Everest would be submerged. It would be more than 2 kilometers underwater. The mountain that represents the absolute limit of Earth's height above sea level would fit inside this trench with room to spare, and at the bottom of that trench, where the pressure reaches over 1,000 atmospheres, where the weight of the water above presses down on every square inch of surface, with a force of more than 15,000 pounds, something lives. The zone below 6,000 meters is called the Hadal Zone. From Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, the god of the dead, the ruler of the place where nothing was supposed to come back from. Scientists named it this for a reason, not because they were being dramatic, because when they first began to understand what the Hadal Zone was, what the conditions there were, how extreme, how far beyond any environment life was supposed to be able to inhabit, the name felt earned. The Hadal Zone covers less than 1% of the total ocean floor area, but what it represents, what it asks of life, and what life has given in response, is proportionally vast. The Hadal Zone exists in trenches scattered across the world's oceans. The Mariana Trench in the Pacific, the Tonga Trench, also in the Pacific, only slightly shallower, the Philippine Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Sunda Trench in the Indian Ocean. There are dozens of them, long dark wounds in the floor of the world, each one an isolated ecosystem with its own specific community of life, shaped by the specific chemistry of its water and the specific geology of its walls and the specific rain of organic material falling from the water column above. Together, the combined area of all oceanic trenches is roughly equal to the area of the continent of Australia, not Australia's ocean territory, the land area of Australia itself. In that space, in those long, narrow, almost impossibly deep cuts in the earth, there are ecosystems we have barely touched, creatures we have not yet seen, processes we have not yet measured. The Hadal Zone is a world within a world within a world, and the deeper you go into it, the more radically different everything becomes. At the pressure of the Hadal Zone, 1,000 atmospheres at the deepest points, the human body would cease to exist as a coherent structure before the mind had time to register what was happening. Not crushed in the cinematic sense, compressed, compacted, every atom pressing against every other atom with forces that ordinary matter simply cannot withstand. The steel of even the strongest submersibles must be engineered to extraordinary precision to survive Hadal pressure for any useful period of time. Even then, the engineering margins are thin. Even then, the submarines that go to Challenger Deep are calculated risks. James Cameron, the filmmaker who directed Titanic and Avatar, built his own submersible, the Deep Sea Challenger, and descended alone to Challenger Deep in 2012. He became the first person to make a solo dive to the deepest point on Earth. He was down there for 3 hours. And what he reported afterward was not the dramatic, vivid, visually spectacular alien world that many people might have imagined. He reported that it was, in visual terms, remarkably barren. The floor of Challenger Deep is soft yellow-grey sediment, nearly flat, stretching in all directions to the limit of his lights. There were few creatures visible to the naked eye. The walls of the trench, far above, were out of sight. The feeling, he said, was one of extreme isolation, not the rich, glowing, creature-filled darkness of shallower depths. Something more absolute, something that felt, he said, like the loneliness of another planet. And yet it was not empty. Beneath that flat, featureless sediment, within it, inside it, living in the spaces between the grains of ancient compressed material, there was life. There is always life, Single-celled organisms have been found at Challenger Deep at a record depth of 10.6 kilometers, not multicellular animals. Single cells, tiny, ancient, microscopic forms of life, so reduced and so fundamental that they are almost the definition of life rather than a particular expression of it. These organisms, called monothalamea, a type of foraminifera, single-celled creatures that can build elaborate shells around themselves. These organisms survive at the absolute deepest point on Earth, in conditions that would immediately destroy anything more complex than they are. They exist in the sediment. They feed on whatever organic material reaches them through the enormous depth of water above. They reproduce. They do the things that life does. At 11 kilometers deep, at pressures that should make the very chemistry of life impossible. The chemistry of life. This is where the Hadal zone does something very specific and very strange. Proteins, the molecules that do almost everything in living cells, that carry oxygen and catalyze chemical reactions and build structures and transmit signals. Proteins are exquisitely sensitive to pressure. They fold into specific three-dimensional shapes to perform their functions, and under pressure, those shapes distort. At high enough pressure, proteins unfold, stop working, and a cell whose proteins are not working is not alive in any functional sense. It is biology waiting to fail. So how do the creatures of the Hadal zone keep their proteins working at 1,000 atmospheres? How does the Mariana snailfish, a pale, gelatinous, almost translucent fish, the deepest fish ever confirmed by science, filmed at 8,336 meters below the surface, how does this fish maintain functional proteins at a pressure that should have unfolded them entirely? The answer was found in a molecule called trimethylamine N-oxide, TMAO. It is a small, simple organic molecule that deep-sea creatures produce in their cells, and its function is to counteract the pressure-induced distortion of proteins. It wraps around the protein structures, forming bonds with the water molecules surrounding the protein, and it holds the protein's shape. It is, in the simplest terms, a pressure stabilizer, a molecular counterweight, and the deeper the animal lives, the more TMAO it has in its cells. The relationship is so precise, so linear, that scientists can estimate how deep an animal lives just by measuring the TMAO concentration in its tissues. This molecule, this pressure stabilizer, appears to have an upper effective limit, above roughly 8,400 meters. The concentration of TMAO required to stabilize proteins appears to reach a biochemical ceiling. The cells cannot produce any more of it without other biological problems arising. And this ceiling, this biochemical limit, may be the reason that no fish has been confirmed deeper than 8,336 meters, not because the environment itself becomes uninhabitable below that point, but because the fish's own chemistry cannot keep up with the pressure. The fish reach the limit of their molecular engineering, and the Hadal zone continues below them without fish at all. This is the kind of discovery that illustrates perfectly why the midnight zone and everything below it terrifies scientists. Not because of what they find, because of what the finding implies. Because the fact that there is a precise depth limit for fish, determined not by temperature or food availability or predators, but by a single molecule's capacity to stabilize protein structure. The fact that this specific, elegant, biochemically determined boundary exists tells you that the deep ocean is not just a dark and extreme version of the surface ocean. It is a place where the fundamental chemistry of life operates under constraints that have no equivalent anywhere else on Earth. It is a place where evolution has had to solve problems that do not exist at the surface, and the solutions it has found are built into the molecular architecture of the creatures themselves, into their cells, into the concentrations of specific compounds in their tissues. The deep ocean is doing things to life at the chemical level that we are only now beginning to understand. Now consider the Mariana snailfish, Pseudoliparis, the deepest fish. It is, in appearance, unassuming, pale and slightly translucent, like something not quite finished, small, about 30 centimeters, without the dramatic adaptations of shallower deep-sea creatures. No enormous teeth, no bioluminescent lure, no nightmarish modifications. It looks, frankly, a little like a tadpole, and yet it is the most pressure-resistant vertebrate, backbone-having animal ever documented on Earth. It lives in a zone where no other fish has been confirmed. It has evolved TMAO concentrations that approach the apparent chemical ceiling for vertebrate life. It has no swim bladder, the gas-filled organ that helps most fish control their buoyancy. Because a gas-filled organ at Hadal, pressure would collapse and rupture immediately. Instead, it is filled with a gelatinous, jelly-like material that is essentially incompressible. Pressure moves through it. The fish does not resist the pressure. It becomes the pressure. Its body, at depth, is as compressed as the water around it. It does not push back. It simply is, at equilibrium with the force crushing in on every side. There is something almost philosophical about that. About an animal that survives an environment not by fighting it, but by becoming it. By surrendering to the pressure so completely that the pressure has nothing left to crush. The Mariana snailfish is not tough. It is not armored or fortified or resistant. It is soft and yielding and full of jelly, and it has decided, through its molecular and evolutionary logic, that the way to survive at the deepest possible depth is to be as much like the water around you as possible, to let the deep become you instead of trying to keep it out. And it works. It has worked for long enough that it is the undisputed champion of depth among all vertebrates. A pale, jelly-like, unspectacular fish, drifting in absolute darkness at a pressure that would eliminate everything we are. Below the Mariana snailfish, in the depths between 8,400 meters and the very floor of Challenger Deep, there are no confirmed fish, but there are organisms. The amphipods are here. Small, shrimp-like crustaceans called Hirondelia gigas, reaching lengths of several centimeters, swarming in extraordinary numbers on the floor of the trench and on its walls. Amphipods are present in enormous densities in the Hadal zone, far denser than in the open midnight zone above. They are efficient scavengers. They process organic material that reaches the trench floor, and the trench, because of its V-shape and the convergent currents around it, actually collects organic material that drifts from a wide area of ocean above. The trench is, in terms of food availability, somewhat richer than the flat abyssal plain it interrupts. Material falls in and cannot easily escape. The amphipods have discovered this and exploited it with the thorough efficiency of everything in the deep sea. These same amphipods, the Hirondelia gigas of the Mariana Trench, were tested in a study that made headlines around the world, not because of their biology exactly, because of what was found inside them. In 2017, researchers analyzing amphipods collected from the deepest part of the Mariana Trench found something in their tissues that should not have been there. Polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, persistent organic pollutants, industrial chemicals that were manufactured primarily between the 1930s and the 1970s and used in electrical equipment, paints, and various industrial applications. Chemicals that were banned or severely restricted in most countries by the 1980s because of their severe toxicity and environmental persistence. Chemicals that do not break down in the environment, that accumulate in biological tissues, that move up through food chains, concentrating as they go. In the tissues of animals living 11 kilometers below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, in the most remote and inaccessible place on Earth, in a location that no human had physically reached until 2012, there were industrial chemicals at concentrations higher than those found in the most heavily industrially polluted rivers in China. Higher, more concentrated, in the deepest place on Earth than in the rivers running through industrial zones at the surface. The silence that followed that finding in the scientific community was the silence of people confronting something that is simultaneously not surprising and completely devastating. Not surprising because scientists had known for years that persistent pollutants enter the ocean and sink, because plastic and chemical waste introduced at the surface eventually reaches depth, because the ocean has no barrier that stops human contamination from traveling downward. They knew this, they had models for it, and yet knowing something in principle and then measuring it in practice, measuring it at 11 kilometers deep in the body of an animal at the absolute limit of where life can exist. That measurement carries a weight that the theoretical knowledge does not. Plastic is there too. In the Mariana Trench, on the floor of Challenger Deep, a plastic bag was photographed there during a survey expedition. Microplastics, tiny fragments of broken down plastic too small to see clearly with the naked eye, have been found in deep-sea sediment at every trench ever sampled. The Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Philippine Trench, all of them. Industrial waste at depths of 9,000, 10,000 meters. The deep ocean currents that circulate slowly through the world's ocean basins, called thermohaline currents, carry particles downward over time, and the V-shape of the trenches, which funnels falling material inward, concentrates what arrives. The trenches are, in this sense, collection points. The lowest points on Earth are where our waste eventually accumulates. The midnight zone and the Haddle zone below it have, in a very real sense, become the Earth's deepest garbage dump. Not because anyone directed the waste there, not because there were decisions made about where to send it, but because physics is indifferent, because what we release at the surface travels downward by the laws of gravity and current and chemical affinity, and the lowest points on Earth are where things end up. The amphipods of Challenger Deep did not choose to carry PCBs in their tissues. The sediment of the Haddle zone was not designed to accumulate microplastics. It simply happened. It is simply happening. Right now, tonight. As this story is being told, particles of plastic and traces of industrial chemicals are drifting through the midnight zone on their way down, as they have been for decades, as they will continue to be for however long we continue to produce them. This is the moment in the story of the midnight zone that scientists find most disturbing. Not the unknown creatures, not the unexplained sounds, not the pressures that defeat engineering. Those things are mysteries to be solved, challenges to be met. But the contamination, the discovery that human waste has reached the most remote and extreme places on Earth, faster and more thoroughly than human knowledge has, that is something else. That is a reckoning. A quiet, cold, 11-kilometer deep reckoning with what we have done to a place we had not yet even fully discovered when we began polluting it. And yet the life is still there, despite the PCBs, despite the microplastics, despite the pressure and the cold and the dark and the crushing weight. The amphipods are still swarming in the sediment. The single-celled organisms are still living in the deepest sediment. The Mariana snailfish is still drifting in its pale, jelly-like way at 8,000 meters. The bacteria are still chemosynthesizing. The Haddle zone is not dead. It is injured, perhaps. It is carrying our contamination in its tissues. But it is alive. Life, in the deep ocean, is not fragile. This is one of the things that the midnight zone insists upon again and again, with every creature found in every extreme it presents. Life is not fragile. Life is tenacious in a way that challenges any reasonable expectation. Life adapts to the exact conditions it finds itself in, however extreme, however hostile, however far outside the parameters we once believed were necessary. Life finds a way in the Haddle zone. Life finds a way, even with our contamination added to its already impossible conditions. Life is, in the deep ocean, a kind of argument. An argument against the idea that there are places where things cannot survive. The Haddle zone has been responding to that argument for hundreds of millions of years, and its response is always the same. Watch me. There is a creature in the Haddle trenches that makes this argument in perhaps the most elegant way of all. The Dumbo octopus, named for the large, ear-like fins on its head that it flaps gently to propel itself through the water, like the Disney elephant flapping its enormous ears to fly. The Dumbo octopus is soft and small and, by any reasonable standard, adorable. It hovers above the seafloor of the Haddle zone, those fins waving slowly, its arms trailing below it, looking for small worms and crustaceans in the sediment. It is the deepest living octopus known to science, found at depths of up to 7,000 meters. In the deepest place on Earth, where the pressure would destroy human technology, where industrial chemicals have been found in concentrations higher than in polluted rivers, where the darkness is so absolute that it has not been touched by a photon of sunlight in the entire history of the ocean, there is a small octopus, gently flapping its ear fins and looking for worms to eat. This is the midnight zone. This is its nature. horror and wonder so closely entwined that you cannot separate them. Terror and beauty existing in the same cold, dark water. The crushing, the impossible, the contaminated, the ancient, and the adorable, all sharing the same featureless sediment floor, all carrying on regardless, all being as alive as the physical laws of this extreme universe allow. Scientists who study the Hadal Zone often describe a specific moment during their research when the sheer reality of what they are investigating becomes briefly overwhelming, when the scale of the unknown becomes, for a moment, not an intellectual concept but a felt thing. A researcher at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution described it as the feeling you get when you drop something precious into very deep water. That particular despair, the knowing that what you have lost is gone beyond the reach of any reasonable retrieval, that the depth is simply too much, that the thing exists down there in a permanence and an inaccessibility that nothing can undo. He said studying the Hadal Zone feels like that. Like something is always just beyond what you can reach. Like the answers are there, sitting on the sediment at 11 kilometers, perfectly preserved in the cold and the dark, and you simply cannot get to them. You send cameras. The cameras show you a small rectangle of the sediment floor, lit by their own lights, while the rest of the trench extends in every direction into darkness. You send nets. The nets bring back fragments, small creatures, pressed by the pressure change as they ascend, sometimes damaged beyond complete analysis. You send autonomous vehicles that wander the floor and record for hours, and when they come back up, they have footage that contains, in its corners and edges, hints of things that passed just outside the frame. You piece together an understanding from evidence that is always partial, always incomplete, always shadowed by the awareness of how much more there is. And still you go back, because the partial answers you have found have already been extraordinary enough to justify every expense, every failure, every piece of footage of an empty sediment floor. Because the Mariana snailfish alone, that pale, jelly-like, molecularly sophisticated pressure stabilizer of a fish, tells a story about the ingenuity of evolution that is worth every kilometer of cable lowered into the dark. Because the PCBs in the amphipods, as devastating as they are, represent a piece of knowledge that the surface world needs, that the world needs to understand about itself and what it is doing. Because the Hadal Zone, even in its contamination, is still telling us things we need to hear. This is the final thing to understand about why the Midnight Zone and everything below it terrifies us scientists. Not because it is a place of terror, but because it is a place of truth. It holds, in its cold and its dark and its crushing pressure, a complete and unedited record of what has happened to the ocean since life began on Earth. The sediment of the Hadal trenches is a library, layers of material deposited over millions of years, each layer containing chemical and biological information about the conditions of the ocean at the time of deposition. Tiny shells of long-dead single-celled organisms, traces of ancient volcanic activity, evidence of mass extinction events, and most recently, in the topmost layers, the layers deposited in the last 100 years, evidence of us, evidence of what we have introduced into the system, a record that will persist, in the cold and the dark and the pressure. For far longer than we will, the Hadal Zone is writing us into its history, into its sediment. We did not ask it to, we did not choose it, but it is happening regardless, in the deepest and most permanent archive on Earth. And the creatures of the Hadal Zone are adapting to what we have added, not quickly, not in ways we can observe in real time, but the selection pressure has changed, the chemical environment has changed. What survives and what does not survive at 11 kilometers deep is now, in some small measure, influenced by what we poured into the ocean decades and centuries ago. The Hadal Zone is, in a very quiet and very irreversible way, a changed place, different from what it was before our contamination arrived, different in ways we cannot fully quantify because we did not measure what it was before. We arrived in the Hadal Zone with our chemicals before we arrived with our cameras, before we had names for the creatures living there, before we understood what T-Mao was, or how bioluminescence worked, or why the Dumbo octopus flapped its fins. We contaminated it before we could even ask if we should. And still it persists, still it lives. Still the single-celled organisms inhabit the sediment at the deepest confirmed depth of life on Earth. Still the amphipods swarm. Still the pale snailfish drifts in the cold. Still, at the bottom of a trench 11 kilometers deep, named for the god of the underworld, on a floor carpeted in ancient sediment and our own waste, there is life. Breathing in whatever the deep ocean breathing is. Existing in whatever the deep ocean existing is. The pressure is absolute, the dark is absolute, the cold is absolute, and life is here anyway. In the part that still awaits, we will rise slightly from the deepest floor. We will return to the midnight zone itself and meet the scientists who have dedicated their lives to understanding it. We will follow the expeditions. We will hear what the researchers say in their own words about what they have seen, and we will begin to understand not just what the midnight zone is, but what it means, what it represents for the story of life on this planet, and what it might represent for the story of life everywhere. For now, let the trench hold you. Let the weight of 11 kilometers of water above feel, for a moment, not like a threat, but like a blanket, like the deep, pressing certainty of something enormous that has decided you are part of it. The sediment is soft beneath you. The amphipods move in their patient, purposeful way through the dark nearby. Somewhere above, a pale fish drifts with jelly-filled composure through pressures you cannot imagine. The Hadal Zone does not know you are here. It does not need to know. It simply continues, as it has continued, through every extinction and every age and every flood of contamination from above, with the relentless, indifferent, magnificent persistence of life at the extreme edge of everything possible. The Midnight Zone has been calling to human beings for as long as human beings have been capable of wondering what lies beneath the surface of the sea, and the scientists who answer that call describe what they find in words that science was not quite designed to hold. You are still listening to Depth Unseen. Where light ends, the story begins. And tonight, we follow the people who chose the dark. There is a particular kind of scientist who ends up studying the deep ocean. You might imagine they are a certain type, fearless perhaps, or unusually comfortable with extremes, drawn to the dramatic. But that is not what the deep-sea researchers themselves describe when they are asked how they arrived at this work. Most of them describe something quieter, a moment of encounter with the ocean, sometimes as a child, sometimes later, in which the scale of what was unknown became not frightening but magnetic, not a problem to be wary of but a direction to move toward. The darkness pulled them not away from it, but in. Dr. Sylvia Earle is one of the most celebrated ocean scientists in history, a marine biologist who has spent more of her life in and near the ocean than almost any other human being. She holds the record for the deepest solo dive by a human wearing only a pressurized suit and no tether to the surface. A walk on the ocean floor at 430 meters in 1979 in a suit called the gym suit, carrying her own life support and stepping alone onto the seafloor in a darkness that no surface light could reach. When she was asked afterward what it felt like to be standing on the ocean floor alone in the dark at 400 meters, she said something that has become famous in ocean exploration circles. She said it felt like coming home to a place she had never been. That particular phrase, coming home to a place she had never been, captures something that almost every person who has descended into the deep ocean reports in one form or another. Something unexpected, something that contradicts the fear the rest of us feel when we imagine being underwater, at depth, in the dark, under enormous pressure. Something that feels less like alien territory and more like a recognition. Like the deep ocean is familiar in a way that precedes experience, in a way that comes from something older than memory. Some scientists believe this feeling is not poetic, not metaphorical, not simply the psychological response of a brave person to an extreme environment. They believe it may be biological, that it may be connected to the fact that life on Earth began in the ocean, that the first cells, the first structures that could be called alive by any definition, formed in salt water, that for hundreds of millions of years before any organism crawled onto land, all life on this planet was ocean life, marine life, underwater life. and that the water, the deep and dark and pressure-filled water, is not foreign to us in the most fundamental sense. It is ancestral. It is where we come from in a way that the land, which life arrived at much later, is not. This is one of the most astonishing ideas to come out of the study of the Midnight Zone. The idea that the deep ocean is not just a habitat to explore, but a history to remember. That somewhere in the chemistry of those hydrothermal vents, in the mineral-rich, superheated, alkaline water pouring from cracks in the early Earth's crust approximately 4 billion years ago, the first chemistry of life assembled itself. Not in a warm pond under sunlight, as earlier theories suggested, not in the atmosphere, struck by lightning into productive reactions, but in the deep, in the dark, under pressure, in the exact kind of environment that the Midnight Zone still contains today. The hydrothermal vent origin of life hypothesis. This is not a fringe idea. It is, as of the current state of scientific research, the most compelling and most supported theory for how life on Earth began. The evidence has been building for decades, and each new experiment brings it closer to consensus. In 2019, researchers at University College London succeeded for the first time in creating protocells, the simplest possible cell-like structures, a stepping stone between raw chemistry and true life, in conditions that replicated a deep sea hydrothermal vent environment. Hot water, alkaline chemistry, high salt concentration, high pressure. All the things that previous experiments had assumed would make protocell formation impossible, and yet, under those conditions, the protocells formed, not despite the heat and alkalinity. Because of it, the heat and alkalinity, the researchers found, did not merely tolerate protocell formation, they actively encouraged it. Think about what this means. The conditions of the Midnight Zone, the very conditions that feel most inhospitable to surface life, the conditions that we look at and see as extreme and hostile, those conditions may be the conditions under which life first decided to exist. The Midnight Zone is not just strange, it is possibly original. It is possibly, in the deepest sense, where we all began. Every human being on this planet, every tree and bird and insect and bacterium, every organism that has ever lived on Earth. Our oldest ancestor may have been a bubble of chemistry in the hot, mineral-laced water near a hydrothermal vent in the dark of a primordial ocean 4 billion years ago. And the environment it emerged from, the dark, the pressure, the heat from below, is still there, unchanged in its fundamental character. The Midnight Zone today is not identical to the early ocean, but it is its closest analogue on the modern Earth. The hydrothermal vents still pour their chemistry into the dark. The pressure still presses. The dark is still absolute. And somewhere near those vents, the chemistry of life continues, in organisms so ancient and so reduced that they are barely distinguishable from the earliest life that ever existed. Bacteria and archaea, single-celled organisms without even the complex internal structures of more evolved cells, living in the vent communities, doing chemistry that the earliest life on Earth likely did. Chemistry that may be the direct descendant, in an unbroken chain of biological inheritance, from the very first living molecules. The Midnight Zone may be where life began, and we are only now, in the last 50 years of human history, starting to understand that the place we came from is right there, below the surface of the ocean that covers most of our planet, in the dark that we have only recently learned to reach. This is, among everything that the Midnight Zone contains, the most quietly overwhelming thing, the most likely to stop a scientist in the middle of a paper they are writing, in the middle of a calculation they are performing, and make them sit for a moment with the sheer weight of it. The origin of everything, the beginning of the story of all life, the first chapter, and we are still reading it. Now, the expeditions, the people who have gone down, the submersible Alvin, operated by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, the facility that has contributed more to deep-sea science than perhaps any other organization on Earth, has been diving since 1964. It has made more than 5,000 dives. It has carried scientists to the hydrothermal vents on the first human visit to those ecosystems. It has explored the Titanic wreck. It has mapped sections of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge the underwater mountain chain that runs almost the full length of the Atlantic Ocean, entirely below the surface. It has collected thousands of samples from the midnight zone, and it has filmed thousands of hours of footage in the deep, dark water, and it has been, for over 60 years, the primary vehicle through which human beings have gained direct visual knowledge of what the deep ocean looks like. The scientists who have dived in Alvin describe the experience in remarkably consistent terms. The descent takes approximately 90 minutes to reach depths of around 4,000 meters. During the descent, the porthole, a small circle of thick, precisely engineered glass, barely 20 centimeters across, shows the water changing. At the surface, blue and bright, then darker blue, then grey, then a deep, deep grey that is nearly nothing, and then, around 200 meters, nothing at all. The light is gone, and for the next hour and more of descent, there is nothing outside the porthole but absolute darkness, occasionally punctuated by bioluminescent flashes as creatures pass through the beam of the submersible's lights. Small lights, brief lights, a pulse of blue, a streak of green, and then dark again. One researcher who made her first Alvin dive in the 1990s described the particular quality of the darkness outside the porthole during the descent. She said it was not the darkness of a room with the lights off, where you know the walls are there, even if you cannot see them, and you know the furniture is there, and you have a map of the space in your memory. She said the darkness outside the Alvin's porthole was a darkness without walls, without edges, without any spatial reference whatsoever. She said her mind kept trying to generate a sense of where things were in the darkness, kept trying to insert distance and perspective, and there was nothing to work with. The darkness was simply there, in every direction, with no gradient, no variation, no hint of depth or distance or surface. She said it was the most disorienting experience of her scientific career, and she described it as humbling in a way that nothing at the surface had ever been. Because at the surface, she said, you always have the sense that you know roughly what is out there, even when you cannot see it. In the midnight zone, you have nothing. You genuinely, completely, have no idea. That loss of spatial certainty, that feeling of being adrift in an infinite and unstructured dark, is something the creatures of the midnight zone have solved in ways science is still cataloguing, because they navigate, they hunt, they find mates, they return to specific locations. They do all of this in the absolute dark, with no visual reference, and they do it successfully enough to have survived here for millions of years. Their navigation tools are senses we barely have. Mechanoreception, the ability to sense the movement and pressure of water around them through specialized organs called lateral lines. Feeling the disturbances created by the movement of nearby creatures, the way you might feel the air move when something large walks quickly past you, in the dark. Electroreception, the ability of some deep-sea animals to detect the tiny electrical fields generated by other animals' nervous and muscular activity, the ghost of their presence in the water, even before they are close enough for any other sense to register. Chemoreception, the detection of chemical trails and gradients in the water, reading the molecular signatures left by the passage of prey or predator or potential mate through the dark, following those chemical whispers to their source. The midnight zone communicates in a language of electricity and chemistry and pressure waves, and the animals that live there are fluent in it. We are not. We arrive with our cameras and our lights and our instruments, and we impose the surface world's language on a place that speaks in something older and stranger, and we record what falls within the vocabulary our tools can capture, and we miss everything else. The researchers know this, the awareness that they are missing most of what is there, that the submersible's lights illuminate a cylinder of space perhaps 20 meters across in a zone that extends for thousands of kilometers in every direction. That awareness is a constant presence in their work. In 2025, the Ocean Census, the world's largest collaborative effort to accelerate the discovery of marine life, announced that it had identified 866 new marine species in a single year. 866 species, named, described, formally entered into the scientific record. A significant fraction of them from the deep ocean, and the researchers behind the project noted that this represented not a slowing of discovery, but an acceleration. That, as tools improve and more expeditions reach the deep, the rate of new species identification goes up, not down. The midnight zone is revealing itself faster as our ability to look improves, but the quantity of what remains to be seen keeps pace with our improving ability. By 2026, the count of newly identified marine species had passed 1,100 in a single year, a 54% increase over previous annual rates. A carnivorous sponge that researchers named a death ball for the way it traps and dissolves small crustaceans in its porous structure. A worm that builds its tube from glass spicules, tiny, precisely arranged rods of biological glass, creating what the researchers who found it called a glass castle. A new species of chimera, the ancient and spectral group of fish, sometimes called ghost sharks, with a ghostly pale body and enormous flat eyes. These are not creatures from science fiction. These are creatures discovered in the last 12 months, living in the deep ocean of the planet we have inhabited for our entire existence as a species. The death ball sponge. Let us stay with that for a moment. Carnivorous sponges are not common knowledge. Most people learn about sponges as filter feeders, organisms that pump water through their bodies and extract tiny particles of organic material from it. Simple, passive, essentially sedentary. The deep ocean has produced a different kind of sponge, a sponge that, rather than waiting for food particles to flow through it, has evolved sticky, hair-like projections on its outer surface that trap small crustaceans when they brush against it. Once trapped, the crustacean is slowly enveloped. The sponge's cells migrate around the prey over the course of hours, enclosing it completely, and then slowly digesting it with enzymes. A sponge eating an animal, slowly, patiently, with no mouth, no stomach, no nerves, no muscles, just cells moving by the most fundamental biological mechanisms, surrounding, engulfing, dissolving. In the scarcity of the midnight zone, filter feeding is not always enough, and so the sponge became something else, something that hunts, something that kills, something that waits, covered in microscopic sticky threads, in the darkness of the deep ocean floor, and lets the darkness bring prey to it. This is what millions of years of extreme scarcity does to biology. It does not produce monsters. It does not produce things that are frightening in themselves. It produces things that are efficient beyond our ability to easily imagine. Things that have removed every unnecessary step from the process of staying alive. Things that have stripped survival down to its absolute minimum and made that minimum work in ways that seem, from the outside, improbable. A sponge that hunts. A worm that builds with glass. A fish that stabilizes its proteins with a molecule. A squid that eats only dead things. An octopus that flaps its ears to fly through the dark. The midnight zone is biology at its most honest, at its most stripped down, at its most without compromise or decoration. Every feature of every organism is there because it works. Because without it, the organism would not exist. There is no redundancy here, no luxury. Every gene is earning its place. Every behavior is paying rent in calories or reproductive success. The midnight zone is biology, with every unnecessary thing removed, and what remains after the removal is extraordinary. Now let us talk about what scientists have found that they cannot explain, because this is the part that does not appear in papers exactly, not in the peer-reviewed literature, where language is careful and claims must be supported by data, but it appears in interviews, in the informal conversations between researchers at conferences, in the descriptions people give of specific dives, specific encounters, specific moments when the footage showed something that did not fit any framework. In 2014, an expedition to the Indian Ocean, conducted by researchers from Oxford University and the Natural History Museum in London, filmed, at roughly 2,000 meters depth, a creature that appeared to be a large, elongated, pale organism drifting slowly in the water column. The footage was reviewed by multiple specialists. No consensus identification was reached. The organism was estimated to be significantly longer than any known species of the type it most closely resembled. It moved with a slow, undulating motion. It appeared briefly and then drifted beyond the camera's range. The researchers noted it in their expedition log as an unidentified large organism. It is in the record. It has not been followed up with a confirmed identification. Stories like this are not rare in deep-sea research. They are actually quite common. Every major expedition that has spent significant time filming in the Midnight Zone has footage in its archive of things seen once and not seen again, of shapes at the edge of camera range, of disturbances in the sediment that suggest the passage of something large, of creatures that match no known species closely enough for confident identification. These observations are recorded, they are professionally noted, and then they wait, in expedition archives and on hard drives in research institutions, for either better footage to confirm what was seen, or for a name to be attached to the shape on the screen. Most of them are waiting still. There is a name for this in deep-sea research. The phenomenon of large, unidentified organisms observed on camera in the deep ocean is called, informally, the large unknown. Not a single creature, a category, a standing acknowledgement that the Midnight Zone contains organisms that have not yet been formally encountered, described, and named. The large unknown is not a scientific term, it is not a formal concept, but the researchers who work in deep-sea biology know what it refers to. They use it, and the fact that a category exists for this, that there are enough instances of large unidentified organisms observed in the deep ocean to warrant a collective term, tells you something about the frequency of the phenomenon. In 2025, alone, a new species of deep-sea squid was formally described, named Mobidickia posidonii, after both the great white whale of Melville's novel and the god of the sea. A deep-sea squid previously unknown to science, belonging to a group that scientists were in the process of revising, finding in that revision that species they thought they knew were actually multiple different species that had been collapsed into one. The deep ocean keeps revealing, even in organisms that are already in the scientific record, that we had not looked closely enough, that what we thought was one thing was actually several, that the diversity was always greater than the count suggested. The ocean census researchers estimate that between 1 and 2 million species live in the world's oceans. 240,000 have been formally identified. 1,760,000 species, at minimum, are living in the ocean right now without a formal scientific name, without a description, without even being known to exist. Alive, tonight, in the cold dark water of the Midnight Zone and the Hadal Zone and every depth in between, doing the things they do, hunting, drifting, glowing, dissolving, reproducing, dying, in complete anonymity. And among those anonymous millions, some are extraordinary. Some, by the mathematics of probability and the evidence of what extraordinary things the Midnight Zone has already produced, are unlike anything in our imagination. Perfectly adapted to conditions we do not understand, in places we have not yet reached, performing functions in the deep ocean ecosystem that we cannot describe because we do not know they exist. This is the thought that occupies the minds of the scientists who have dedicated their careers to the deep. Not in a frightening way, not with dread, with a feeling that is closer to reverence. The Midnight Zone gives them that. It strips away the comfortable certainty of a world that seems known and replaces it with the living, pulsing reality of a world that is mostly mystery. And in the mystery they find not anxiety, but purpose. The reason to keep going down. The reason to build better submersibles and longer cables and more sensitive instruments and brighter lights. The reason to write the grants and sail the ships and lower the equipment and wait, in the cold and the dark and the silence above the porthole, for the footage to come back showing something new. And something new always comes back. Not always dramatic, not always immediately interpretable, but always something, a behavior not previously documented, a depth not previously reached by a particular species, a chemical reading that suggests a process not yet named, a shape on a screen that will take months of analysis before its significance is understood, always something. The Midnight Zone is not a place that keeps its secrets entirely. It shares them, one by one, at the pace that human technology and human persistence can extract them. It does not give everything. It never gives everything. But it gives enough to keep the scientists coming back. Enough to sustain careers and institutions and expeditions and programs. Enough to keep the story going, because the story of the Midnight Zone is not a story with an end. It is not a mystery that will be solved and then filed away. It is a story that grows as you read it, a mystery that deepens as you solve parts of it, a place that becomes larger, not smaller, the more you understand. Scientists have been going down for 60 years with sophisticated instruments, and they have found things that rewrote biology, chemistry, geology, and astrobiology. And the consensus among those who have spent the most time studying it is that we are still in the early chapters, still on the first pages of a book that may be longer than any book ever written. The origin of life is possibly in those pages. The definition of what environments can support biology is in those pages. The evidence of what humans have done to the most remote places on Earth is in those pages. The names and descriptions of millions of species that have never been catalogued are in those pages. The answer to whether life exists on other worlds, whether the chemistry of the deep ocean is a universal template, replicated in the dark oceans under the ice of Europa and Enceladus, and wherever else liquid water meets internal heat in the darkness of space, that answer too may be in the pages of the deep ocean story that scientists are only now beginning to read with any fluency. And all of it is happening right now, tonight, in the dark below the ocean's surface, in the cold and the pressure and the absolute absence of sunlight. All of it is happening. The bioluminescent flashes, the marine snow drifting down, the hydrothermal vents pouring their chemistry into the cold, the amphipods swarming in the trenches, the ossidax worms doing their slow, patient work in the whale bones, the vampire squid trailing its filaments, the Mariana snailfish drifting at 8,000 meters with its jelly-filled body and its precisely calibrated TMO and its total, untroubled, evolutionary authority over a depth that would destroy everything else we know. All of it is happening right now. Has been happening every night you have ever slept through. Has been happening since before the first human eyes opened on the surface of this planet and looked at the ocean and wondered what was below. The Midnight Zone does not need you to know about it. It does not need to be observed to continue. It has been continuing, in its cold and perfect and impossible way, for so long that the human history of the surface world is less than a blink in its deep, dark, geological patience. You are a new thing. You are a very new thing, and the Midnight Zone is very, very old. But it is good that you know. It is good that you have followed the story this far. Down from the surface through the twilight and into the dark, past the anglerfish and the vampire squid, and the hydrothermal vents, and the whale falls, and the amphipods in the trench, and the snailfish at 8,000 meters, and the single-celled organisms in the sediment of Challenger Deep. It is good that you know this place exists, that you carry it with you now, somewhere in the back of your mind, as a weight and a wonder both together. That when you think about the ocean, you will not only think about the surface, about the blue and the waves and the light. You will think about what is below. And in part 5, the last part, we will bring this story home, not to the surface, not entirely, but to a place of quieter knowing. We will ask what the Midnight Zone means for us, at the surface, in our lives, in our understanding of what this planet is. And slowly, gently, as the story finds its final depth, the Midnight Zone will begin to hold you the way it holds everything it has ever kept, patiently, with cold precision, with the kind of permanence that only the very deep and the very dark can offer. But not yet. For now, let the questions remain open. Let the unnamed species swim in their nameless way through the dark water. Let the footage sit in the archive with its unidentified shapes at the edge of the frame. Let the amphipods carry their PCBs in the deepest trench on Earth. And let the death ball sponge wait with its sticky threads in the dark. And let the glass castle worm add another precisely placed rod of biological glass to its transparent home. Let all of it continue, as it always has. As it will, long after this story ends. Something is always glowing, something is always sinking, and the dark is always, perfectly, at home with everything inside it. The Midnight Zone is not separate from your life. It is not a distant, exotic, unrelated mystery happening somewhere else in a world that does not touch yours. It is holding your world together right now, tonight, as you lie still and let the darkness of this story settle over you. You are still listening to Depth Unseen. Where light ends, the story begins. And tonight, the story finds its deepest truth. We have traveled far together in this darkness. We began at the surface, where the light is warm and the rules make sense. And we descended, through the twilight zone, where light becomes memory, into the midnight zone, where memory of light becomes nothing at all. We met the anglerfish and the vampire squid and the pelican eel that swallows photons. We found the hydrothermal vents, those superheated chimneys of impossible chemistry, where life first learned to exist without sunlight. We followed the whale falls to the sediment floor and watched the zombie worms dissolve bone from the inside out. We descended further into the Hadal Zone, into the god of the underworld deep of the Mariana Trench, where a pale jelly-like fish drifts at 8,000 meters with molecular precision, and single-celled organisms live in sediment that has not seen light in 4 billion years. We met the scientists who went down in their steel shells and came back changed. We sat with the unsolved recordings and the unidentified shapes at the edge of footage. We counted the unnamed millions. We felt the weight of the contamination we sent down before we sent our cameras. And now we are here, in the last part of the story, in the place where the depth becomes not terror, but understanding. Not a problem to solve, but a presence to hold. And what needs to be said in this final chapter is something quieter than everything that came before. Something that does not announce itself. Something the Midnight Zone has been saying the entire time, beneath all the astonishment and all the strangeness, in the low, continuous, unhurried voice of the very deep. It is saying that it matters, that the Midnight Zone, this dark and crushing and seemingly alien place, is not separate from the world you live in. It is not the ocean's basement, disconnected and irrelevant to the warm and bright and living surface. It is the foundation, the engine, the quiet machinery on which the entire surface world depends, and has always depended, and will continue to depend whether or not we ever fully understand it. Consider what the deep ocean does for the air you breathe tonight. Every breath you take contains oxygen. The oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere is produced, in roughly equal measure, by two sources. Land plants, the trees and grasses and ferns and mosses of the terrestrial world, turning sunlight and carbon dioxide into sugar and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. And ocean phytoplankton, microscopic, single-celled plants and plant-like organisms drifting in the sunlit layer of the surface ocean, doing the same thing, at a scale so vast that they produce approximately 50% of all the oxygen on Earth, half of every breath you have ever taken, half of every breath you will ever take. From tiny creatures in the surface layer of the ocean, too small to see, collectively more important to your continued existence than every forest on every continent combined. And the deep ocean keeps them alive. The Midnight Zone is the bottom of a circulation system that no engineer has ever designed and no machine has ever equaled. Cold, dense water near the poles sinks downward and flows along the ocean floor in vast, slow rivers called thermohaline currents. These currents carry oxygen-rich water down into the deep and bring nutrient-rich water up from the deep in a process called upwelling. The nutrients, the dissolved minerals and chemicals that phytoplankton need to grow, come from the deep. From the decomposition of marine snow on the deep ocean floor, from the recycling of organic material by the bacteria and archaea and strange, pressure-adapted organisms of the Midnight Zone. Those nutrients are carried by the thermohaline currents back to the surface, where the phytoplankton use them to grow. The phytoplankton grow. They produce oxygen. They produce the base of the ocean food chain. And when they die, their bodies sink as marine snow, back down into the Midnight Zone, where they are decomposed and the nutrients are released, and the cycle continues. An unbroken circle, surface to deep to surface again, driven by the cold water of the Midnight Zone sinking, pulling the warm surface water behind it, generating the currents that distribute heat around the entire planet. The Midnight Zone is not passive in the climate system. It is not simply present. It is active. It is the engine of the thermohaline circulation that gives Western Europe its mild winters and the Pacific its monsoons, and the tropics their rains. It is the reason the Earth's climate is not simply temperature determined by latitude, with the poles permanently frozen solid and the tropics permanently uninhabitable. The deep ocean moves heat around the planet, redistributes it, smooths the temperature gradient that would otherwise make most of Earth's surface extreme and most of its area hostile to the kind of life that we. This is invisible. It happens in the dark. It happens at depths you will never visit and in timescales, decades, centuries, millennia, that do not feel real to human intuition. But it is as real as the breath you are taking now. It is as real as the temperature outside your window. It is as real as the rain that falls and the crops that grow and the air that fills your lungs. The midnight zone is doing that, right now, tonight, without knowing you exist, without caring whether you know about it, with the patient, impersonal, vast competence of a system that has been running, without interruption, for hundreds of millions of years. The ocean has absorbed more than 90% of the excess heat that human beings have added to the Earth's atmosphere by burning fossil fuels. 90%. If the deep ocean had not absorbed that heat, global temperatures would already be 36 degrees Celsius higher than they are today. 36 degrees higher. Not 5 degrees, not 10, 36. The kind of temperature increase that would have made most of the Earth's surface uninhabitable for the kind of complex, warm-blooded, metabolically demanding life that includes human beings. The kind of temperature increase that would have remade the surface world beyond recognition. The deep ocean absorbed it, quietly, in the dark, in the cold water of the midnight zone and below, absorbing the heat that we generated at the surface, distributing it, slowing the warming, buying time for a surface world that did not know it was being saved. The deep ocean has also absorbed approximately 30% of all the carbon dioxide that human beings have added to the atmosphere since the industrial age began. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, a molecule that traps heat in the atmosphere the way a blanket traps heat against a body. Too much of it warms the planet. The deep ocean has been pulling it out of the atmosphere, dissolving it into seawater, driving it down through the biological carbon pump, the process by which phytoplankton absorb carbon dioxide at the surface, fix it into organic matter, die, and sink, carrying that carbon into the deep ocean where it is locked away in the sediment for thousands to millions of years, away from the atmosphere, away from the warming effect, into the cold, dark sediment of the midnight zone, where it becomes part of the ancient record of the ocean's chemistry, layer by careful layer, year by quiet year. The midnight zone is the Earth's largest carbon sink, the deepest and most permanent storage of the carbon that would otherwise accumulate in the Earth's atmosphere and accelerate the warming of the surface world. And the organisms of the midnight zone, the bacteria and archaea and soft-bodied creatures and all the unnamed millions, those organisms are essential to the functioning of that carbon pump. They are not bystanders. They are the mechanism, the bacteria that decompose the marine snow and release nutrients. The microbes on the deep seafloor that consume methane, seeping up through the sediment before it can escape into the water column and eventually the atmosphere. Methane is 80 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide in the short term, and the deep ocean microbes are consuming enormous quantities of it every day, silently, in the dark, with no awareness that they are performing one of the most important climate services on the planet. The midnight zone does not know it is protecting us. The bacteria do not know that the methane they consume would otherwise warm the surface. The thermohaline currents do not know that they are moderating the climate. The marine snow does not know that it is carrying carbon away from the atmosphere. These are not decisions. They are not acts of generosity. They are simply the functioning of a system so old and so vast that the concept of intention does not apply to it. And yet the result of that system's functioning for the surface world is survival, is habitability. Is the climate stable enough for agriculture and civilization and the long, complicated, frequently astonishing project of human existence? We exist because the midnight zone works, not just in evolutionary terms, not just because life may have originated in the deep sea vents 4 billion years ago, but right now, in the present. The midnight zone is working for you tonight. It has been working for you every night of your life. It will continue working, in the dark, in the cold, under the pressure. After this story ends, and after you wake up tomorrow and go back to the top surface world with its light and its noise and its comprehensible distances. And this is the thing that the scientists who study the Midnight Zone carry with them. Not just the wonder, not just the astonishment at what lives down there, but the weight of knowing what it does, what it provides, what would be lost if it were disrupted. Because the Midnight Zone can be disrupted, the warming of the ocean surface is beginning to affect the thermohaline circulation, the deep currents that drive the carbon pump and distribute heat around the planet. Warmer surface water is less dense. Less dense water does not sink as efficiently. Less sinking means weaker circulation. Weaker circulation means less nutrient upwelling to the surface. Less nutrients means less phytoplankton. Less phytoplankton means less oxygen production, less carbon capture, less food for the entire ocean food chain, less of the foundational service on which all of this depends. It is a chain of consequences so large, operating across timescales so long, that it is very easy not to feel it. Very easy to look at the ocean from the surface and see only water, only waves, only the familiar blue of the surface world, and not see the midnight zone below. Not see the circulation and the carbon pump and the methane consumers and the ancient sediment layers. Not see the whole vast, dark, essential machinery working silently below the surface of the thing you look at and think you know. Now, in the deep of this final hour together in the darkness, let us go back to something personal, something that is not about carbon cycles or thermohaline currents or the chemistry of climate regulation. Let us go back to what it feels like to be small in the presence of something so vast, what it feels like to stand, or float, at the edge of the unknown and not look away. Every person who has gone down into the midnight zone has come back changed in a specific way that they find difficult to fully articulate. It is not the change of having survived something dangerous, though the deep ocean is dangerous. It is not the change of intellectual expansion, though going down always produces new knowledge. It is something more personal, more internal, something about perspective, about the realignment of scale that happens when you spend time in the presence of something genuinely enormous, genuinely ancient, and genuinely indifferent to your existence. Dr. Robert Ballard, who discovered the wreck of the Titanic and has spent more time in deep submersibles than almost any other person alive, has said that the deep ocean teaches you humility in a way that nothing on the surface can. He said it strips away the sense that human beings are significant in any cosmic way. Not cruelly, not in a way that diminishes, but honestly, in a way that feels clarifying, like cleaning a lens. After time in the deep, the ordinary dramas of the surface world look different, smaller, not unimportant. He was careful to say not unimportant, but properly sized, held within their actual scale against the scale of something that was 4 billion years old and 100 kilometers wide and 11 kilometers deep and home to millions of species and the engine of the planet's climate, and completely, serenely, permanently itself. Against that scale, the things that feel enormous in a human life, the anxieties, the urgencies, the sense of pressure and importance, and the fear that things will go wrong. Against the midnight zone, those things are real, but they are small. They exist in a world that is itself small, a thin, warm, brightly lit layer on the surface of a planet whose largest and most significant habitat is the dark and the cold and the crushing deep. And knowing that, genuinely knowing it, having felt it in your body at depth, having sat in a steel sphere in the absolute dark and understood what was outside, what was above and below and in every direction, knowing the vastness of what you were inside, changes you. It changes you gently. That is the final quality of the midnight zone that deserves to be named in this last chapter. It does not change you with drama. It does not announce itself. It works the way all the best deep changes work, quietly, in the dark, over time, in the same patient way that the carbon pump works, in the same slow, permanent way that the sediment layers build. one thin addition at a time, one expedition at a time, one organism named, one current mapped, one sample analyzed, 1 hour in the dark behind a porthole watching the bioluminescent flashes pass. The change accumulates. It becomes something solid, something you carry, sediment-like, in the deep layers of yourself. And this story has worked that way too, tonight. The midnight zone came into you layer by layer. The anglerfish first, and then the vampire squid, and then the vents, and then the whale falls, and then the trench, and then the scientists, and then the carbon, and then this, the final settling. And somewhere in the accumulation, the deep ocean stopped being a faraway place and became a presence, a known weight, a darkness that is not frightening because it is familiar now. Not familiar the way a room is familiar. Familiar the way something ancient is familiar, the way the ocean itself is familiar, the way darkness is familiar to everything that has ever closed its eyes. There is something still happening down there right now that no human being has ever seen, something moving in the absolute dark of the midnight zone. In water so cold it barely stays liquid, under pressure that no technology has fully explored, in a part of the ocean that a submersible has never reached. Something old, something patient, something perfectly, precisely adapted to exactly the conditions it finds itself in, because millions of years of selection have carved it into exactly the shape the deep requires. It does not know it is unseen. It does not experience itself as mysterious. It is simply being what it is, as it has always been, in the dark, in the cold, doing the quiet work of existing. And 99.999% of the deep sea has never been seen by human eyes. That number, that vast, almost total darkness of human knowledge about our own planet's greatest habitat, used to feel like a failure, like an absence, like the painful awareness of what we do not know. But it does not have to feel that way. It can feel instead like possibility, like the most extraordinary kind of gift. The knowledge that on the same planet where you were born, in the ocean that covers most of its surface, in water that has been here for 4 billion years, there are things you have never imagined. Things that have never been imagined by any human mind. That the universe of the strange and the wonderful and the impossible made real is not exhausted. That discovery is not finished. That the next expedition, the next camera lowered on the next cable into the next dark water, will bring back something that science has never seen. Something that will require a new word, a new category, a new revision of what we thought we knew. It always does. Every time, without exception. The midnight zone never stops teaching. It never gives you a final answer that closes the question. It gives you answers that open into larger questions, deeper darknesses, stranger, more beautiful impossibilities. It is a place that exists, fundamentally as an argument against the idea that we have understood enough, against the comfortable settling of knowledge into certainty, against the closing of wonder in favor of the known. The midnight zone says, always, quietly, in the cold voice of the deep, there is more. Go further. Look again. What you found last time was only the beginning of what there is to find. And the scientists go, and they find, and they come back, and they write it down, and they go again. And tonight, you went too. Not in a steel sphere on a cable, lowered into the Pacific by a research ship rolling in the swells, but here, in the dark of wherever you are, in the stillness of this late and quiet hour, with the weight of the story settling over you the way the water settles over everything that sinks into the midnight zone, layer by layer, gently, with increasing completeness, until the surface is far above, and the light is a memory, and the dark is simply where you are. Let the darkness hold you now. Let it be, for a moment, not the absence of something, but a presence of its own. The midnight zone is present. It is there right now, as it has always been, doing its patient, irreplaceable, invisible work. The carbon pump cycling, the thermohaline currents moving, the bioluminescent creatures pulsing their cold light in the absolute dark, the marine snow drifting down, the Ocedax worms working their slow chemistry in the whale bones, the vampire squid trailing its filaments in the oxygen minimum zone, the Mariana snailfish drifting at 8,000 meters with its jelly-filled body and its ancient molecular calm. All of it is happening. All of it is real. All of it is part of the same planet you live on, the same ocean that covers most of it, the same dark that the Earth has always held beneath its waves. There is nothing left to find tonight. There is only stillness now. The kind of stillness that the deep ocean knows better than any other place on Earth. The stillness of water that has not been touched by wind in 1,000 years. The stillness of sediment settling in layers so thin they cannot be measured in human time. The stillness of a creature hanging motionless in the dark, not asleep, not afraid, not waiting for anything in particular, simply existing in the cold and the pressure and the absolute quiet, the way life has always existed in the deep, without urgency, without the surface world's insistence on movement and noise and the relentless forward push of time. Let that stillness come into you now. Let the pressure of the deep be not a weight but a holding. Let the cold be not a threat but a clarity. Let the dark be the soft, complete, ancient dark of a place that has been dark since long before human beings needed light to feel safe. The darkness here is not waiting to be interrupted. It is not anticipating the morning. It simply is, and you are simply in it. And that is enough. The midnight zone does not end. It continues below consciousness, below dreaming, below whatever depth the mind reaches in its nightly descent away from the surface world, and it will be there when you return to the surface tomorrow, working, holding, cycling, absorbing, distributing, pulsing with cold light in the dark, being the foundation of the world above it with the patient, ancient, indifferent generosity of something that has never needed to be thanked. It does not need your thanks, but it is good that you know it is there. It is good that the midnight zone is no longer entirely dark to you, that some of its creatures have names in your memory now, that some of its processes are understood in your mind, that the deep ocean, which most human beings never think about and almost none will ever visit, has become tonight a place you know, a darkness that is yours, in the same way that sleep is yours, and the night is yours, and the quiet is yours. The story began where light ends, and here, at the end, the light is still gone, the dark is still complete, the pressure is still absolute, the cold is still the cold of water that has never been warm, and life is still here. It has always been here. It will always be here. Let the dark hold you. Let the deep carry you. Let the midnight zone take what the surface world cannot keep tonight, and hold it in the way that only the very deep and the very permanent know how to hold, with nothing missing, with nothing left to look for, with everything exactly as the deep ocean has always arranged it, still, cold, dark, alive.